girls, and thank you for listening to Truth to You. That's truth2u.org. I'm Jono, and joining me today is Jason Spiritualbabies. G'day, mate.
G'day, Jono. Good morning. Or good evening for you.
It is, actually, and it's bright and early in the morning where you are, and you're getting some sunny weather. But we can't talk about that, as odd as it is that you have sunny weather in Ireland, because we're going to try and fit all of this into, the space of 15 minutes. That's the challenge, right?
That's a real challenge.
It's a real challenge, because what you've asked me to do is to go through the Tanakh and look at all the places in the Tanakh where what's the word we're looking at?
We are searching for Mashiach today.
We're searching for Mashiach, which is...
Messiah. In English, we'd say anointed. That's a fair.
Anointed.
Yeah, that's fairer.
Okay. But really, for the most part, in the Tanakh, it's mentioned as anointed. Now, how many times in the Tanakh does it appear?
39 times.
39 times, and some of them are mentioned as anointed, and some of them are mentioned. What else is it translated as?
Depending on the kind of the situation that word's strapped into, they change slightly. But yeah, we've got anointed with a capital A, anointed with a lowercase a, anointed ones, and Messiah. But there's 4 ways that it's been translated into English, but they are all the same word when you go back to the Hebrew.
And that's Mashiach. Okay, so now I went and made a list, and I have to admit it was a little bit harder than I thought. And to be honest, I had about 7 Bibles open going back and forth, because there's a little bit of inconsistency in English Christian Bibles. I don't know if you found the same thing, but I certainly did. So I think I've got it right as to who the word Mashiach applies to. And what's the Strong's number, by the way?
The Strong's number is 4899.
4899.
So people can play along at home.
Now, let me check my list off with you, and I want to know if you've got the same. Are you ready for this?
Yep, sure.
Okay, so it starts in Leviticus. I've got Leviticus chapter 4, verse 3, also verse 5 and verse 16, and it goes on, Leviticus 6:22.
Right.
So that's 1, 2, 3, 4 verses. All of those seem to be identifying the high priest. Are you good with that?
Yeah, the anointed, which is HaMashiach.
Okay, all of those.
All of those. There's 4. So there's 4 of those in Leviticus, all with a lowercase a, all the anointed. This
is Aaron that we're talking about.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Okay, that's good. We're continuing on. We get into Samuel, and we get 1 Samuel chapter 2, verse 10.
Right.
And it's mentioned in verse 10. It's also mentioned in verse 35 of the same chapter. The first one in verse 10 seems to be referencing a king, though the king is unidentified. I don't know that we have a king at this stage yet in Israel. In verse 35, again, he's mentioning a king. He's unnamed, although we find out later it's in reference to King Solomon. Is that what you got?
Yep.
Then we've got 1 Samuel 12, 3 and 5. Both of those are referring to King Saul.
Right.
Pretty straightforward?
Yep.
Okay. 1 Samuel 16:6, David is anointed king, and he's obviously, we've got Saul, and there's the struggle there, but he is to be king. Samuel anoints David. We're good with that?
That's right.
I've got down here, I've written it 24:6 and 10, and 26, 9, 11, 16, and 23. All of those in 1 Samuel are referencing King Saul. Is that what you've got?
Yep.
Good eye. 2 Samuel chapter 1, verse 14 and verse 16. I identified that as King Saul.
Yes.
2 Samuel, now this is interesting, Mr. Spiritual Baby. 2 Samuel chapter 1, verse 21. What is the Mashiach in this verse?
Yeah, let's have a look. For there the shield of the mighty was despised, the shield of Saul no longer rubbed with oil.
So it's a shield.
Right.
It's Saul's shield.
Saul's shield.
It's Messiah.
Right, is Messiah. And Mashiach can mean, we say anointed, but really it means smeared.
Smeared with oil.
Right.
Okay.
And I think it's fair to say that when Jacob poured oil onto his pillar to make it shine so he could spot it again in the sunlight, at least that's what I imagine he did it for.
Sure.
That was also Mashiach.
To set it apart, right? To set it apart.
Yeah.
From the other rocks.
And that was Mashiach in some way.
2 Samuel 19:21. That's King David.
Right.
Okay, 2 Samuel 22:51. Also King David, but it seems to be alluding to it goes on to say, and his seed forevermore. Not just King David, but the Davidic king from David to Solomon and on, right?
Right, and the INT actually says, and shows loving kindness to his anointed, to David and his descendants.
Fair enough. 2 Samuel 23:1, King David.
Right.
Okay. Now this one I thought was curious, and it does pop up in the Psalms as well. This is 1 Chronicles 16:22. I just wondered if it is referencing Israel or if it's referencing the king and the high priest. But the context of the verse seems to be from Abraham and on and Egypt, and then you're traveling through the nations. Before you get to Israel, they didn't have a king then, right?
That's right.
So it to me it seems to be alluding to Israel.
Yeah, I suppose it's fair to say that anointed ones doesn't always mean kings.
And as you pointed out, it's derived from a psalm, so it could be in a poetic sense referring to Israel.
Right. Yeah, I'd concur with that.
Okay, so now listen, dear listeners, we'd love to know what you think, because some of these were kind of difficult, to be honest. So listen in and check it with your Bible. And if you come to a different conclusion, please let us know. But that was 1 Chronicles 16:22. 2 Chronicles 6:42 is King Solomon.
Right.
Then we get really kind of tricky. This is Psalm 2, verse 2. And again, I think I would have to say this is in reference to King David or Solomon, or to a Davidic king, in David and his seed. If we go to Acts, we jump over the New Testament, which isn't what we were going to do. We're looking at the Tanakh, but in Acts 4:25 and on, it says that this is a Psalm of David. The Psalm itself doesn't say that, but the connection is made here in Acts 4:25.
Right.
And
Psalm 2:2 says, "The kings of the earth rise up, and the rulers band together against Jehovah and against his anointed." And Acts 4:26, "The kings of the earth rise up, and the rulers band together against the Lord and against his anointed one."
Now I'm a little bit confused though, because then this is what we have here is the New Testament saying that this is a Psalm of David, and yet it goes on to say in the New Testament in Acts 25 and on, makes the connection to say that this is Jesus.
Right.
But what I don't understand, I don't want to get into the theology of that, but what I'm curious about, and I'm going to jump to the end here just for a second. You mentioned that the word is Mashiach is translated as Messiah, and that's done consistently throughout most translations, almost most Christian translations. Where is it translated as Messiah?
In Daniel.
Why is it translated as Messiah in Daniel, the exact same word, and not translated in a Christian Bible here in Psalm 2:2? Or have you found a translation that uses Messiah in Psalm 2, verse 2?
No, I absolutely haven't. Of 39 times that Mashiach is used, it's only ever translated, in all the ones I looked at, it's only ever translated as Messiah twice, and both of those are the Daniel references.
I would love to know, because I really looked into this. Does that seem curious to you?
Oh, very. I mean, obviously...
It's an opportunity missed.
Right, it is.
For the Christians, I mean, if I was writing a Christian translation, I'd put Messiah in Psalm 2:2, because the New Testament says that it's about Jesus, and so therefore you've got to put Messiah back there. Why not? You did it to Daniel.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay. If anyone has an answer to that, I would love to hear it, but I couldn't find it. So, but what it does have, Mr. Spiritual Babies, it does have anointed with a capital A, at least in my New King James. It does in the Holman as well?
It does in the Holman, and it does in the the American Standard Version, the INT. The King James doesn't have a capital A.
It doesn't. And you know what? Either does the NIV. There's no capital A in the NIV. There is in the New King James. There is in the English Standard Version. There is in the Holman, and there is in the New American Standard Version, but not in the NIV. I find it really interesting. We're going to encounter a few of these capitals, and we're going to see some inconsistency in Christian translations. But moving right along, my friend, where are we up to? We're continuing in the Psalm. Psalm 18, verse 50, that's King David and his seed forever.
Uh-huh.
Psalm 20, verse 6, and Psalm 28, verse 8, we're talking about King David.
Yep.
Psalm 84, verse 9, we're talking about, again, a Davidic king. It could be David or David and his seed. Psalm 89, verse 38 and 51, King David.
That's right, yep.
All right. Psalm 105, verse 15. This is the one that's quoted, right, in First Chronicles 16:22. So I'm gonna stick with Israel on that one again. And again, I'd love to hear from the listeners on that one. Psalm 132, verse 10 and 17. King David and his seed. But in the New King James, I've got a capital A.
Okay, because regular KJV, lowercase a.
All right, now I'm going to tell you this in the New American Standard, lowercase a. In the Holman Christian Bible, lowercase a. In the English Standard Version, lowercase a. In the New King James, capital A. And in the New International Version, the NIV, lowercase a. It seems like they've ganged up against the New King James, and they don't think that there's a Christological connection here. So that's an interesting one. I think the little A's have it. The next, 17, 132:17 in the New King James, also a capital A. All the other ones are lowercase a. Continuing on in chronological order, the word Mashiach in the Tanakh, we arrive at Isaiah 45, verse 1.
This is an interesting one because this is
weird.
And he's prophesied Cyrus.
Cyrus, Persian king.
Right. So the fact he's a Persian king makes it doubly interesting.
Kind of weird, but Yehovah calls him my Messiah.
Right.
All right. So this is unusual, but we have a Persian king as a Messiah in Isaiah 45, verse 1. Lamentations 4:20. I had to put down King Zedekiah. It was a bit of a hard one. I had to do a little bit of searching and a bit of digging to get to that conclusion, but it seemed pretty clear in the end that was King Zedekiah. Again, love to hear from the listeners on that one. And then we get to Daniel. Now, this, like you mentioned, Mr. Spiritual Babies, Daniel 9, 25 and 26 is the only place in the whole Tanakh out of the 39 times that Mashiach is used that it is translated in the English as Messiah with a capital M. Is that right?
Yep, and all of the translations I'm looking at have got the capital M.
Do you know what's really weird?
Mm-hmm.
I've got one that doesn't have that.
Oh, which one?
Remember I read to you where anointed is capitalized?
Right.
In all of those, the NIV did not capitalize anointed. But you know what? When you get to Daniel 9, 25 and 26, it translated as capitalized anointed one.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So it says until the anointed one, the prince, or just the anointed one?
Until the anointed one, the ruler.
Ah, okay.
And in 26, the anointed one will be put to death. So it's interesting. So they've definitely, everyone has imposed a Christological suggestion here, but the NIV does see fit to capitalize anointed, but they don't use Messiah. But
they've stayed constant with the meaning of the word, but they've added their own little spin at the end. Now
the question is, who is this one talking about? Now, can I offer, because this is a hard one. This is really a hard one, and there's so many, and I've heard some really, really wacky stuff in regards to these passages. And Daniel's just one of those books. But I have got that the first anointed one is in reference to Cyrus.
Right.
Is that what you came to?
Yep, and actually I listened to a very good recording from Tovia Singer that some of our listeners might be familiar with. And so I'll put that link up as well under the video, and people can go and listen to that. It's like an hour and a half, and it talks all about Daniel 9, and I think it'll be a great help for some people. Excellent.
Okay, so if that's of interest to people, if they're shocked by that, you should definitely have a listen to that. But the other possibility, I think, is possibly Joshua the high priest. But now there's also the second anointed one, and everyone seems to agree, well, from a scholarly approach, that's a different anointed to the anointed ruler or the anointed leader or the anointed prince that's first mentioned in regards to Cyrus. The second one, I have a number of scholarly opinions that say that this is the deposed anointed one is the high priest Onias III.
Oh, that's interesting.
Well, that's Second Maccabees 4, verse 16. You find that. But I've got. Well, I'll tell you what I've got. Now I'll just give the reference for that because really it deserves a reference. And I'm reading from the study notes of the fully revised 4th edition of the New Oxford Annotated Bible, the New Revised Standard Version with the Apocrypha from Oxford. So there's that also my my new JPS, which is also published by Oxford, I think, isn't it? Yes, it is. There you go.
Okay.
They had pretty much the same notes, and so the general consensus is that the first anointed, the first Messiah, if you like, in verse 25 is Cyrus. The second one is Ananias. The third. Oh my goodness! Now there's one more.
One more.
Okay, this is Habakkuk. We don't get to go to Habakkuk a lot.
Not enough. I mean, it's a great book.
Great prophet. Chapter 3, verse 13. What do you got?
You came out to deliver your people, to save your anointed one. You crushed the leader of the land of wickedness. You stripped him from head to foot.
You know what? I had all these study Bibles open. I'm going back and forth. I'm trying to find something specific, but all I can see is that either it's in reference to a king of Judah, or it could be in reference to Israel again. I would love to hear from the listeners in regards to that one, because that one kind of seems a little ambiguous, a little nebulous, and I couldn't put my finger on it. I think a king of Judah or Israel is probably fair. However, Mr. Spiritual Babies, this happens to be one or another one where there's a capital A in the New King James. I don't know if you don't have that in the Holman, right?
No, there's no capital A, and there's no capital A in the King James or in the American Standard Version either.
There's no the New American Standard is not capitalized. The Holman is not capitalized. The English Standard Version is not capitalized. The NIV is not capitalized, but the New King James is capitalized. So here, for some reason, against the decision of all other English reputable English Christian translations, they've decided to give this a Christological slant. I don't know why. But these, in any case, Mr. Spiritual Babies, these are the 39 mentions of Mashiach in the Tanakh. So once again, we've got the first mentioning high priest in reference to Aaron. We've got King Solomon, King Saul, King David. We have Saul's shield. We have David and his seed. We have a reference to potentially to Israel. In fact, 3 references to Israel. Oh, we've got Cyrus.
Cyrus, right.
We have Cyrus, we have King Zedekiah, and we have maybe Cyrus twice, if we've got that one right in Daniel, and Ananias the third, and the last one, I'm just going to say maybe that's Israel, and I'd love to hear from the listeners on that. But that's the short of it.
That rather begs the question.
Go on.
If there are 39 instances of Mashiach in the Tanakh, and we've covered them all, where do we get the concept of a coming Mashiach?
Well, because, I'll tell you why, because Yehovah says, quite specifically, he will set his foot upon the Mount of Olives and split it in two, and he will restore all things. He'll set up the tabernacle of David once again, as it says in Amos, I believe, and in doing so, he will restore that system. Therefore, we'll have not just one Messiah, we'll have 2. He'll restore the king, which will be in the line of David and Solomon. We know that much, and he'll restore the high priest. And we know about that too, because we read about this in Ezekiel, right? In Ezekiel chapter 40 and on, and of course, the high priest in the order of Zadok.
It is fair to say then that our perceptions of a Messiah who will rule, and not, often we have a perception that the Messiah will come, and his mere existence will cause other things to happen in the world, rather than.
Well, you know what? I like to. Yeah? I like to think of it in this light. I like to think that when Yehovah restores all things, the Messiah will be one of them. The Messiahs will be included in those things restored. I prefer to think of it that way, rather than say, when the Messiah comes, then all things will be restored. Because that's not actually the order of events. That's not the way it happens. Yehovah comes back to us. We return to him. He returns to us. The great and terrible day of the Lord, as it's often referred to. And but once it's all said and done, he restores all things. And within that list is the Mashiachs of Israel.
Right. That's my point. The Messiah is not the reason for the restoration of all things. He is a part of the restoration of all things. Jehovah is the reason for the restoration of all things.
Amen.
And so it's fair to say that we are labeling Messiah onto somebody who is not featured as Messiah in the text.
Oh, you mean traditionally in the Christian
Right.
tradition?
Yeah.
Okay, well, yes. Well, if you want to talk about that, we're going to. Do you really think we're going to get this into 15 minutes? Are you serious? All right. So what we could, I'll tell you what we can say about that. And this is not to say whether or not Jesus is the Messiah or anything like that. Obviously, people have their views and they're totally entitled to that. We respect that. But I want to go to 1 Samuel chapter 8, where Israel demands a king. And they basically say, look, we want to have a king. They said to Samuel, they said, look, you're old and your sons, they don't walk in your ways, and now make us a king to judge us like all the nations. And of course, the king of the nations around them, and particularly coming out of Egypt, the king was a demigod. He had a godlike status. He was a god-man, and they wanted a king like the nations, which is why this displeased Samuel. And when they said, give us a king to judge over us. So Samuel prayed to Yehovah. Yehovah said to Samuel, listen, look, take heed to the voice of the people and all that they say to you, because they haven't rejected you, they've rejected me, that I should reign over them, because Yehovah is our king. And, there's this Messiah cult, and it's not just in Christianity, it's in, very various expressions of Judaism as well, where everything is pinned on this Messiah. But really what we're waiting for and what we should be doing is returning to Yehovah. And he will restore all things. But he said they haven't rejected you, they've rejected me, that I should reign over them. But that's, I think that's a valid verse to throw into the mix.
Absolutely. Yep.
I think we've done it. What do you reckon?
Yeah, that was it.
Mashiach in the Tanakh. Thank you, Mr. Spiritual Babies. Spiritualbabies.net is the website, and also Spiritual Babies on Facebook. So like the page and get involved there. Thank you, my friend, for coming back onto Truth to You. That's truth number 2, letteryou.org. And until next time, dear listeners, be blessed and be set apart by the truth of our Father's Word. Shalom.